This book put me into a reading slump. It was so good that I don't even have the physical copy to show you because I was talking it up so much that my best friend wanted to borrow it and read it herself. She has also read it and she also enjoyed it. I do need to get a full feedback from her because she hasn't told me her thoughts on it, but she was reading it here a little bit at my house and I was seeing some of her live reactions and I felt the same and I was like, we are maybe a little messed up in the head because we enjoyed this book maybe too much. But I loved Playground by Aron Beauregard. I think Aron Beauregard is a phenomenal writer and you might think, wow, that's big praise for somebody who writes extreme horror and splatterpunk, but I don't think just because somebody is writing in the extreme horror genre that the writing is going to be garbage. Because I feel like that's a maybe misconception or some kind of preconceived notion that you might think. Because I thought that. I was like, how good could writing be when they're just writing about killing back and forth? Like, how much depth am I going to get from this book, really? Like, I'm going in here for the kills and the gore and the blood. But I'm happy to say that I was wrong about that. I think Aron is a great writer. I think there was a lot of depth in these characters if you're willing to take the time and read it. I was pleasantly surprised on how much depth we got in their backstories and how well rounded some of these characters became. And don't get me wrong, some of these were crazy, extreme. Oh my god, this person is just evil. This is shock value because who in the world, like, that is just craziness. Like, just the idea of this Saw style playground of these torture traps that are just essentially death traps, and who's really gonna create something like this? That's the fun part. You know, you're going into this with some level of, okay, this is literally just for entertainment. But there was moments where I really felt for some of these characters because of the journey that they do go through. And specifically, I'm talking about, I believe the character's name is Rock, and he's kind of like the henchman for the main villain. And his story is so deep, honestly. His thoughts, the way that he is dealing with his trauma, his past trauma, his current trauma, and just seeing how he deals with that kind of abuse his entire life and how he comes into himself by the end of it was really deep for me. Honestly, by that last scene in the book, there was water in my eyes. I mean, I wasn't there sobbing or anything, but I probably did or almost did shed a tear because of how the story did develop, especially his story in particular. The rest of it was just pure high energy entertainment. I'm telling you, I was gripped from the very beginning. I was absolutely disgusted by our main villain. There was 2 chapters back to back in particular towards the beginning of the book that were vile, just absolutely gave me that, like, I want to vomit feeling in my mouth, and I was not expecting those parts. It's very, like, sexually grotesque and disturbing. I went into it thinking Saw, but it gave me so much more in that regard, and that has to do with the main villain's backstory and her why behind everything. So yeah, and whatever you're thinking it is, it's far worse than that. I'm just gonna put it that way. If you're already grossed out by whatever you're imagining in your head, it's worse. So if that disturbs you, maybe don't pick this up. But if you're like, I'm intrigued, what are you talking about? Do it. It wasn't bad enough for me to have to put down the book or anything. It was just really vile, and then you get past it and then you get on with the story. And yes, she's still terrible throughout the entire story, but it's not as bad as those 2 chapters, I would say. It just kind of gets into the games. And, they start playing the playground games, and it becomes a series of tests and trials and can we survive? And that is super fun. It felt like Squid Games, where, the outcome is life or death, basically, but, you're having fun watching them do these challenges and, can they survive? That is a lot of fun for me. I love games, I love challenges, I love competitions, trials, anything like that is a good time. So I can't give this book praise enough that it is so entertaining. I was like, I'm smiling because I had so much fun. Like, I would reread this book. And that's the thing, right? Once you read something, it's kind of like, am I going to get that same excitement out of rereading it? I mean, probably not like the first time I read it, but it's just like rewatching one of your favorite movies, right? I can watch Saw over and over again, and I keep bringing Saw up because it's such a perfect comparison in my head to this book of how grimy and deathly these traps are. Deathly? Deadly. But yeah, this book had my heart racing. I was literally sitting there, like, couldn't put it down because I needed to know, who is going to survive? Are they going to make it out? And there was moments where I was truly like heart pounding, really nervous about, are these kids going to make it past this trap, and who's going to be alive at the end? Who's going to survive? Because you already go into it knowing like a lot of people are going to die, if not everyone. So I was very curious on how that was going to wrap up and who would possibly make it by the end of it. And also, would Geraldine Borden, our main villain, get her comeuppance? Like, what kind of revenge is coming for her? I know that the prequel just got released this year, and I do want to read that. After reading that book at the beginning of October, I was in a complete slump because I was like, nothing else is going to match this. Like, what other book could I read that's going to give me this level of entertainment? Like, there's no other book like this, is there? Like, what other book could possibly even be like this? And the rest of the books on my TBR are nowhere near the same style or genre even. So I was just kind of in this place where I didn't even want to read anything else because I already knew that the level of entertainment would not match up. So that was tough. I've never really experienced that where I read a book and was just turned off by everything else after it for a while. I guess I just didn't want to lose that heightened experience where I was just having such a fun time and I knew that it was over. I definitely want to read more books by Aron. I think his writing style is funny. He's very descriptive in funny ways where he finds like 10 different ways to describe blood to you without it just being the same descriptor that you would expect, because he's not afraid to kind of say it in weird ways, which I appreciate it, and it made it different and entertaining, and it didn't feel repetitive. The thing about this now is I have Playground at such a high pedestal that I'm even worried that his other books are not going to do it for me just because of the subject matter of Playground. I feel like this might be like lightning in a bottle for me because it wasn't like I was in love with like his writing alone, although it was good. It was the whole concept here. And so I could go and pick up his other books like Slob. However, I don't see myself liking it as much as I like this one just because of the concept, just because the theme of this book is so unique. This might just be one of those experiences with a book that you just can't find again. This might just be something I need to reread to get that level of enjoyment because no other book is going to match that. But I do think there's something special about that in finding a book that is so different, so unique, that you're not going to get 20 other books that are the same thing. And I don't mean to dog on romance every time, but you're not going to get 20 other enemies to lovers books that are all kind of the same exact storyline with different faces. You know what I mean? Is there even another book like Playground? I don't know. But my guess is no. Would I like to be in search of other things similar in the vein of like Squid Game or Saw esque type of stories? Yeah, I think those are very enjoyable to me, and I think I would really like things like that. So I think I'm going to keep that in mind when going into some of these books where there's games and challenges and trials. I think those types of themes in a book are going to hit with me because that's just me and that's my personality. So that's something I'm definitely going to take away from this. But do I think I'm going to find another playground? No, I don't. I think this is a special book. I think it's a one of a kind book. I think if this piques your interest, definitely pick it up. I don't feel like you'll be disappointed. I think it's going to be so much fun for you. Unless you are turned off by all the trigger warnings, because if you have trigger warnings, just don't even pick it up. So much fun. I can't even stop smiling about it. It was just such a good time. There's no way they would ever make a movie about this, but if they did, oh man, I don't think I would watch it because that's disgusting. So the next thing I ended up reading in October was Too Old for This, and I didn't like this book. I thought this book was very lackluster. I was excited about this at first because I love to read books with older main characters. I love the idea of somebody in a retirement home, or, you know, a senior citizen, or just, you know, just older and like in their twilight years being the focal point of a story. I love that. I don't think I read enough of that, or I just, in general, maybe there's just not enough of it out there. I don't know, or maybe I'm just not finding it. But, you know, in mainstream media, you know, you're always getting the young ingenue. A lot of the main characters are 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds. But for me, as a woman who is aging, as we all are, but I'm getting, you know, I'm moving farther away from that 18-year-old protagonist, and I'm getting closer to my middle age, and then eventually I'll be moving into my twilight years. You know, obviously there's so much time for that to happen, but I'm starting to really desire some older voices and some older experiences and some more life behind these characters. Aging is scary, and I can't go backwards. And do I still love reading young adult books? I do, because I love to regress and remember my youth and go live those experiences again. And sometimes when I read YA, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I've grown past that. I don't want to read that anymore. I'm too old for that. I'm not there in that mindset. For me, it helps me to remember that mindset and go back to a time that I really enjoyed. I loved being young and dumb and carefree and experiencing a lot of feelings for the first time, and having those emotions be so big and, you know, all encompassing, because that's how it is for a teenager or a very young adult. But as I'm getting older, I want to see that life doesn't just end after your 20s. Okay. So I'm already somebody who's in my mid 30s, and I want to see more characters my age. I want to see more characters past my age, because aging doesn't stop. I want to see that characters that are older are still relevant. You know, once we get to a certain age, it's almost like we get discarded, especially as women. So I'm liking that people are writing older characters a little bit more, and I'm hoping that continues to be a trend, because older people are still alive and living, and they still have experiences and thoughts and feelings, and I want to see what goes on in their head. I want to see some of that on the page. One of my favorite books of all time is The Har by David Sodergren, and that female main character is 84 years old. That is something that stuck with me. I had never read a book with an older main character like that before. That hit me so hard. I was so in love with this book, and I still am, and I will recommend that constantly. I'm still thinking about it, and it's been almost a full year since I read it. So now that you know why I was excited about Too Old for This, let me tell you why it didn't work for me. I just did not find the character interesting at all. I have no problem with unlikable characters. I love to read about characters that I don't relate to or don't like. However, if I don't care about her story, I'm not going to care about the book. And of course, she is a serial killer, so she's not really made to be likable. And I went into that knowing that. But her reasonings behind the killings were not intriguing in the slightest. I don't know, it just felt very silly and pointless to me. Like, the whole reason we have this story is because she is a retired serial killer. So she's gotten away with these murders that she did when she was younger, and then the whole point of this book is that she has to kill again to keep her secret covered up, because somebody comes in and tries to kind of dig in a little bit, and that kind of spirals into her having to cover up the mess that she's kind of made once again. And it is a little bit funny to see her trying to do all these things as an older character. And I also think the ending was not satisfying. I think the idea of this book intrigued me way more than the execution of it. But because I am still intrigued by that idea of older characters and being involved in some kind of a slasher, I'm actually really excited to try the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, is what I think it's called. That one sounds really fun, and I'm hoping that that gives me the kind of enjoyment that I was seeking from this book. And I do hope that it's not just purely a fun, campy slasher. I hope there's a little bit more depth to it, because I do love to read about what older people actually feel and are struggling with and are experiencing in their older age. So I guess I just wanted more depth and more conversation about her being older. And I feel like I didn't get enough of that in Too Old for This. It just felt very surface level, I guess. Like, you know, she was complaining like, oh, my hip, or oh, you know, my back hurts. I wanted more of that like psychological exploration of a killer's mind. That's what I wanted. I find it hard to really enjoy books that are just surface level, made for entertainment only. I need that level of depth. Like I was saying, Playground had that level of depth that I felt, that I grasped onto, that made it so much more for me. And I feel like Too Old for This didn't really have that. It felt like this was just oh, this is just going to be a good time. But even that, I didn't really feel like it was all that entertaining, to be honest. But I don't know, to each their own. I do think other people had fun with this book. I've just didn't. I gave it 2 stars, but I would definitely not pick this up again, and I definitely would not even recommend it to anybody. I think there are probably other books that do the serial killer trope a lot better. It missed the mark for me. The next book that I ended up reading was My Lips, Her Voice by L.L. Madrid. Now, this was a debut novel by a debut author that I was really excited to read ever since February. I found out about the premise of this book, and I was like, I feel like I'm going to love this. This is a book put on by Creature Publishing, a publisher that I really enjoy their works that they've put out. So I was thinking, you know, this book is going to be right up my alley. And it was. However, I think the reading slump hurt me, because I was still on that level of wanting that entertainment of Playground and not really being ready to read anything else. However, this book came out October 14th, I believe, and I was supposed to read it as an arc, and I didn't even get to it in time, so I felt like really pressured to read this book and get my thoughts out on it, because I did want to continue to hype it up, because I felt like that's something that I had committed to. So I did feel really pressured to read it, even though I wasn't fully in the right headspace. So in this experience, I feel like I learned a lot of things. One is that I don't know if I'm ready for arcs. I don't know if I'm in a place where I want to be reading arcs, because I have so many books on backlist for authors that I want to get to, that I don't know if I need to be reading like all these like books that are coming out and new releases, and having the obligation of having to hype these books up or leave reviews for them and help in that. I think if I do read arcs, I think I'm going to pick like one a month maybe, but I don't want to kind of build up my NetGalley and feel like I'm indebted to read these books, because it starts to me feel like an obligation. Like if I don't read it in time, I feel like I'm letting people down. And I've said this in another video, so if you want to go to that ramble, I'll link it down below. But I just feel like it puts pressure on me to get to something where I'm not always in the right mood to read it. And I feel like that's what happened to me with My Lips, Her Voice. It had all the things that I would love about a book. It had possession, it had strong female characters, it had queer representation, it was YA, which I enjoy, so that was okay for me. It had a murder mystery element, it had a serial killer element, it had a small town vibe to it that felt very spooky and atmospheric. Her writing was really good, her descriptors were great. She made me feel really immersed in the world, but I was having so much trouble jumping into the world of this story because my brain just wasn't ready to be there. My brain was still in Playground, and it was hard to get over into a new headspace, and that hurt my experience and also hurt my reaction to the book. And I feel really bummed about that because I do think that this is something that I would have really enjoyed if I was ready to read it. And so I'm definitely taking that away from this experience, is if I'm just not ready to read a book, I'm not gonna force myself to read something just because I feel obligated to read it. And that goes for, books that I pull from my TBR game. Sometimes I do feel like I'm obligated to read those books because I pulled them from the game. But you know what? I have to think about it as these are a pile of possibilities. It doesn't mean I have to read these books this month. It's not homework. These are books that I should want to read, and I'm picking them because I want to get to them. These are books that are either on my shelf or on my digital TBR because I put them there for a reason. So if I'm not in the mood to read them at that time, I'm not going to pick it up and do a disservice to the book or myself, because nobody wins in that experience. I feel like a lot of the story just kind of went over my head. I missed a lot of things. I really didn't feel like I was paying attention. I feel like I wasn't invested. I wasn't in the world. So what I ended up doing, because it was eating me up inside, and I knew that wasn't the book's fault or the author's fault. I knew it was a me problem, and I was so bothered that I didn't give this book the full level of attention that it deserved. So what I did is completely reread the book all over again. And when I didn't fully grasp something, I went back and reread that line because I really wanted to get into the story. I wanted to feel everything that she had put on the page because her writing is really good. And to say that for a debut author is so important, to highlight that her writing is great. The way that she set up the world and put me into, once I was in it, I was in it. Her descriptions are so haunting. There was moments that a ghost would come out and I was just getting chills because there's, ghosts. Did I say that there was ghosts in the story? This is a ghost story. So this is what it feels like. A perfect autumn, small town, haunting ghost story. That's what this book feels like. And I think this is the perfect time to read it. So if you haven't picked it up, I would say pick it up in November because it just feels right to be reading it in that gloomy weather. Something I found was really interesting is the different timelines. So we have our main character, Audrey, who is being possessed by her dead cousin. Now, her cousin is also a central voice in this narrative, which is fascinating because we get this idea of somebody being controlled and her body being taken over. So Audrey is no longer in control of her own body at times. It really touches on this idea of consent because there's a lot of times where Mara, her cousin, just kind of takes over her body in this possession and can hear all her thoughts. So nothing Audrey is thinking is even private. So that is such a awful, chilling, terrifying idea that I can't even imagine just somebody being inside of my body, having control over my physical and also mental. They're essentially sharing this body. And Audrey is feeling so torn because she loves her cousin and she is sad that she was murdered. But she's also grappling with the idea that she wants Mara out of her body because Mara being dead is now trying to deal with the idea that she no longer has a body, but her mind is still very much alive and she is only able to kind of still stay alive in possessing her cousin. And these girls are all in high school. So it's really heartbreaking to see Mara trying to let go of life when she's so young and seeing that this has been stolen from her, so there's just this struggle of I want you here, but I also don't want you in my body. Like, we cannot share a body, and that's what Audrey is dealing with, and Mara is dealing with the loss of her life essentially, and not wanting to move on, not being ready to move on because she's so young and had so much life to live. And she was just, there's also this love story because she wants nothing more than to see her girlfriend, Zadie, who is another voice in this story. So this story has multiple points of view, which is very fascinating. And Zadie's story is all of her own, where she is learning to let go of Mara as well, because Mara was her girlfriend and they did have this troubling relationship, as any young relationship goes through, but she is also dealing with the idea of wanting to move on and maybe pursue a new relationship, and she has feelings for this other girl. So we get kind of a love triangle story. I liked that aspect. I thought that was really interesting because I saw it as this concept of wanting to hold onto and respect somebody's memory because you loved them, but now that they've passed away, you almost feel like this is a complete betrayal to move on with your life. And Zadie, being this young girl, has so much life ahead of her. Of course, she's going to have to move on, but how much harder is it to move on when the person that passed away is very much still present, because Mara is still present in Audrey's body. Then we get another perspective, and that is Audrey and Mara's grandmother. And with that storyline, we get this generational blessing, or maybe curse, of being able to see ghosts. What I thought was really interesting about this is you see how the different members of the family that have this gift or curse respond to it, because some members hate it. They feel terrorized. They are frightened. Some people are drinking it away just so they don't have to experience their what they're going through, and just trying to numb themselves and block it out. And then we see the story of, you know, Audrey and Mara's grandmother and how she deals with what her gift is and how she starts to kind of like tune in a little bit. And then Audrey also possesses this ability to see these ghosts, and she's kind of being haunted by them and not knowing why. And there's this one ghost in particular that is so chilling. There's one particular scene that stood out to me, and if you've read it, you know, but it's the car scene when Audrey goes into the car to try to get away from this haunting ghost that appears that she is terrified of. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's the car scene. That one, just, I'm still getting like chills on my arms from that scene. It was so good, and I could just picture it, and I was like, oh my god, that's terrifying. I really loved, you know, getting to know these characters. I really loved the generational line and how we saw different people and their experiences, how they dealt with this special ability that they have. I really enjoyed the back and forth struggle between Audrey and Mara, like battling for this body. The part that I didn't enjoy as much was the murder mystery element. And I just think in general, murder mysteries are really hard to do. It's really hard to set up red herrings and try to kind of fool the reader and make it so that it is gratifying at the end, and that like, oh my gosh, twist. I'm not going to say exactly when I figured it out. I'll just say that it was less than halfway into the book, but there was something that I read that was so obvious as to who the killer was that it really threw that part of the book off for me. You know, how do you go on giving possible suspects without it being completely obvious that it is or isn't this person? So that's tough. I ended up giving this a 3.75. I feel like maybe coming up in 2026, I would want to refine my rating system a little bit differently, or find a way that I can really lock into what my ratings mean for me. I think it just comes down to me not being confident in what I'm feeling about a book, or not confident in how my rating system is. So I really want to work on that moving forward, is getting more confident with my thoughts and my critiques and my likes and my dislikes, and why I like something versus why I don't like something, and where I would place that in my own scale. It is hard because it's so subjective and everybody's scale is different. So some people might see a 3-star book and think, oh, that's awful. But other people would see a 3-star book and say, oh, well, that's still a really good book. You know, 3 stars is still enjoyable. So if you have any tips, or, you know, if you want to tell me how you do your rating system, or what you think about a 3-star book, like, is a 3-star book good or bad for you? Or is it just kind of mid? Like, what does a 3-star book mean for you? Give me your ideas in the comments, because I'd love to know your thoughts, because I'm still trying to shape my own thoughts around rating systems, and I love to hear feedback about how other people do it, what they think like a 1 through 5 is for them. I like to see that, like when people post, this is how I review and these are what the star ratings mean for me. I love to see those kind of posts like over on Bookstagram, because everybody's is slightly different. Now, the last book I read in October, I just squeezed it in at the tail end, was my viewer's choice from my final FMC game, and that was Pet Sematary. Now, this is another book that I felt obligated to read because I had people recommend this to me in my comments for my TBR game, and I felt like, how could I ask people to recommend me something and then not read it? I feel like that would suck if I just didn't pick up the book that you guys recommended to me. So I squeezed this in at the very end of October, and I want to say thank you for pushing me to read this book finally, because it was so good. This was a 5-star read for me. So that was really exciting because I started out the month of October with a 5-star read. It got a little slumpy and slow in the middle, but I will say I was enjoying my October because I was doing October activities and having a really good time for like Halloween stuff. So my life was full and enjoyable. It just wasn't great for reading, but it's okay because I started out with a 5-star and then I ended the month with a 5-star. So it had a really great bookend experience as far as my reading goes. Okay, so I mean, this is a classic. I can't believe it took me so long to get to this book, and I still haven't watched the movie yet, but I can't believe as a horror movie fan that I have never seen Pet Sematary still to this day. But I am going to watch it soon, hopefully with some of my movie club friends. I have a group of people that I became friends with that we like to watch horror movies together, and this is probably going to come up soon on our list of watches because there's other people in that group that also have not seen it, which is validating for me because I'm not the only one. But anyways, so this is a story that revolves around grief, and I am in my grief horror era. It's really resonating for me. Grief is such a prominent part of my life right now ever since my dad passed away. So anything that has to do with grief and how people are grieving and how they're dealing with their grief and just all the different emotions that come with that are very cathartic for me. So this was heartbreaking. Now, there is an introduction by Stephen King in this that I think is fascinating. And he says, "When I'm asked, as I frequently am, what I consider to be the most frightening book I've ever written, the answer I give comes easily and with no hesitation. Pet Sematary. It may not be the one that scares readers the most. Based on the mail, I'd guess that one is probably The Shining, but the fear bone, like the funny bone, is located in different places on different people. All I know is that Pet Sematary is the one I put away in a drawer, thinking I had finally gone too far." I think one of the most frightening things in my life that I've always said, what am I most afraid of? And my answer was always losing the people that I love. That's what terrifies me the most, is living in a world where the people that feel like my entire world, that I love and that love me, do not exist anymore. And when you think about how much you love somebody and how much you don't want to live without them, it's frightening what you would do. And that's what this story is about how much we love and how much we are willing to sacrifice to have that love and to keep that love. Is it worth it to have that love if the cost is detrimental to yourself and other people? So the main characters of the story is this family who just moves into this new house, and their neighbors are this older couple, and you essentially start seeing how different people are responding to the idea of death. And you have with this older couple, this elderly woman who has really bad arthritis. You have her husband, that they are basically inseparable and have been together for years and years. You see that this man, this older man who befriends the husband who is the main character of the story, essentially, they become good friends and start hanging out a lot. And he starts getting information from this older man about secrets in this area in this community. We have this mother who can't even look at death because she experienced this loss really early on in her childhood, and she kind of has this, trauma that stemmed from it, this experience that she just can't get away from. She doesn't even want to talk about it. She gets very upset at even the mention of death. And you see her relationship to death and loss very differently than you see some of these other characters. And I think it's so fascinating to me, the different characters and how they each either accept or tolerate or push away death in their own life, and their fear of what's to come and also their acceptance of what's to come. But anyways, I love this book, and maybe it's just because I read it at a time where I felt like it was perfect for me to read it. And so that's, going back to say, sometimes we read books at the right time and sometimes we read books at the wrong time. And I think it's really important to really take a look at where you're at and what you're feeling and what you're in the mood for, because that could really help or hinder your enjoyment of a book. Like, are you in the mood to read something about grief and death? Then pick up Pet Sematary. If you're not, maybe read it at a different time in your life. And that's my 2 cents for that. And that's my October reading wrap up. I only read 4 books, but I still think I had a really enjoyable October, and I'm okay with it. We don't always have to read, 8, 10, 20 books in a month to enjoy a good month of reading. I had 2 5-star reads, so I'm happy. I'm already sensing that because of the Dungeons and Book Dragons readathon that I'm participating in currently for November, my reading wrap up for November is going to be a lot larger because I'm squeezing in so many books already just to get points for team fighters, and it's so far it's been a really eventful time. I mean, I can't tell you how fun this readathon is, and I'm so excited that I jumped on this and am a part of it. The amount of effort and creativity that Ivy is putting into this readathon just has me so elated. Like, if you love Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy and adventure and reading, obviously, this is such a fun readathon to be a part of. And it's not too late. Just jump in the Discord and start participating now. You can just totally jump in at your own pace. You can even join Team Halflings that isn't part of the competition and just kind of just read at your own pace, but just still be a part of it, a part of the community, and see all the cool elements that Ivy has created for this. It is so much fun. So anyways, with that being said, I am going to leave you here. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions on any of the books that I've read, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!